You're too poor and have no ambition. I belong to my boss's world of wealth. My wife laughed at the gala while flirting with him in front of everyone. And that night, I quietly decided to show her what real ambition looks like. We were 3 drinks in at the gala, floating through circles of tailored suits and cocktail dresses like we'd rehearsed it. My wife's hand lingered on her boss's arm, just a little too long. I caught the gleam in her eye. It wasn't admiration or flirtation, it was calculation, as if she were weighing investments. And then, as if reading stock tickers, she dropped it. You're a good man, just not ambitious. She didn't even look at me when she said it. Just took another sip of her wine, her eyes still fixed on him. Her boss laughed, that loud, hollow laugh that fills the empty spaces in a room. I didn't laugh. I just blinked once, set my glass on the edge of a passing waiter's tray, and turned towards the exit. No fight, no scene, not even a pause to wait for a reaction. Let them have their little joke. I was already past it. The moment I stepped outside, the contrast hit me. Silence and a cold rain, the kind that seeps down your collar and chills you to the bone. I didn't pull out my phone, didn't call a cab. I just walked over to the valet stand where an old man was standing under the awning, shivering with every gust of wind. No coat, no umbrella. I took mine and handed it to him. I didn't say anything, just gave him a nod and walked out into the rain without it. I walked the 5 blocks home with soaked shoes and dripping hair, but I wasn't angry. I was lucid, with a sharp clarity, as if something dull inside me had finally clicked. It didn't break, it just shifted. Because the thing is, men like me don't explode, we calculate. Most of you are probably listening right now without subscribing. Over 90% never do, but if you're still here, it means something about this is hitting you where it matters. So take a second, hit the button. It tells the team to keep finding stories that actually matter. Anyway, back to her. She came home late, smelling of wine and adulation. She didn't notice the drenched towel in the hallway, or the fact that I was still awake, sitting in the dark with a whiskey. She just came in, kicked off her heels, and mumbled something about how exhausting networking was. I didn't say a word, just watched her move through the kitchen like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just casually shattered me in front of a room full of people and handed my dignity over to a man who probably called interns sweetheart and had a yacht named after himself. She went to bed. I stayed up, scrolling through news articles, old names, corporate directories. She never asked about my family, where I really came from. She assumed I was just the quiet guy who fixed things around the house, filed taxes early, and refilled the Brita. But I've always said, the most dangerous man in the room is the one no one sees coming. And she had just given him a reason. I thought about the old man under my umbrella. The way he looked at me when I gave it to him, not surprised, but expectant, as if he knew someone eventually would, as if he was waiting to be seen. It's funny how people think ambition always comes dressed in flash and noise. Sometimes it wears soaked shoes and a quiet smile. The next morning, I made her coffee, 2 sugars, no cream, just how she likes it. She barely looked up from her phone, muttering about how important Monday was going to be. Big presentation, she said, could change everything. She had no idea how right she was. She was already halfway through a sentence about some brand unification strategy when I handed her the travel mug. She took it like it was owed to her, barely a glance in my direction as she scrolled, her thumb moving with corporate urgency. The perfect lipstick, the heels louder than necessary, the kind of Monday morning design to make junior women feel smaller. Presenting to a managing partner today, she said, stuffing files into her leather tote. It's a long shot, but if it lands, it opens all the floodgates. And before you ask, no, you can't come. It's invite only. I hadn't asked. She threw her jacket over one shoulder, phone wedged between her cheek and shoulder like a vital organ. No, Claire, slide the Capella logo left, not up, and use my presentation's visuals, not Todd's. He tanked last quarter. Pause. I'll be the one at the front of that room today. They'll remember my name, not his. I just grabbed the keys. The drive was silent. Her voice was a metronome of passive-aggressive instructions to her assistant. Tell Adam no. I don't have time for a catch-up. I need to meet with the Alberg Group's rep before 10. She didn't ask why I was driving her when she usually took her own car on mornings like this. She didn't notice the way I kept my eyes on the road, as if I were counting the miles, as if I were counting the seconds. When we pulled into the underground garage, she barely said thanks. just gathered her things and strode towards the elevator with the grace of someone convinced the building owed her a standing ovation. And then the doors opened. The lobby polished to a gleam, corporate art blinking soft colors on the walls. Suits buzzed in and out like bees around a hive, but one group stood still, right in the center, under the chandelier. It was the man I'd given my umbrella to, except he wasn't shivering anymore. He wasn't hunched or looking longingly at the lobby cafe. He was standing tall, in a suit that cost more than her nearly $1,000,000 annual bonus. Beside him were two others, one with a leather briefcase, another with a badge that read Special Advisor. The front desk manager stood beside them, her hands clasped as if waiting for instructions. He looked at me, not her, me, and nodded. Not casually, not for show, but respectfully. I nodded back. The clacking of her heels stopped. She was frozen beside me. "What? Who is that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer, just stepped around her, brushing her elbow lightly as I passed. "Have a good day," I said. Quiet, pleasant, forgettable. Except I could feel her eyes burning into my back like nails. And I knew her mind was racing faster than her mouth could form questions. I didn't turn around. Outside, I waited just long enough to see her look over her shoulder again at the man. He hadn't moved, but now he was talking to the building's head of security. Two other senior VPs were nearby. One of them handed him a folder. The receptionist, usually a teenager with acrylic nails and AirPods hidden under her hair, had straightened her posture as if she were being watched. Because she was. She didn't know what she was seeing yet, but her instincts had finally kicked in. The danger wasn't the man she'd mocked at the gala. It was the silent space between us, the one she'd filled in the blanks with her own smug assumptions she was now scrambling to erase. And just like that, the pedestal she'd built for herself began to crack. Not from a blow, but from the silence. I crossed the street and got in my car. My phone vibrated once. A text from an old acquaintance. "He's in. See you tonight." I texted back with a thumbs up and drove away. She wanted ambition. She was about to learn what it really looked like. That night she asked again, this time pretending not to care. Casually, as if she were just curious, as if she hadn't spent the entire ride home in a tense silence, checking her phone every 30 seconds as if it could give her a name. "Hey," she said, leaning against the doorframe of my study, swirling a glass of Merlot. "That guy in the lobby today, the one in the expensive suit. Who was he?" I looked up from my book. "Just someone I helped once." She let out a laugh a little too sharp. "You helped him? What? You did his taxes in the rain." I smiled politely. "Something like that." She lingered longer than necessary, swirled the wine again, then left, muttering, "Weird." She didn't believe me. That was obvious, but she didn't ask again. Not yet. And that was the beginning of her mistake. The next morning she wore her favorite blazer, the one she only wore when she wanted to command attention without looking like she was trying too hard. Her lipstick was precise. She even changed her heels at the last second. More height, more presence, as if she were preparing for a battle but didn't know who the enemy was yet. Then the cracks came. It started with a missed call, then two, then a calendar update from her assistant. Capella meeting postponed. Albert presentation moved to TBD. At first, she snapped. "What do you mean postponed? I don't get postponed." She called her boss. No answer, texted Todd. "He says he's in meetings all day," she muttered, her fingers twitching. She marched up to the top floor, shoulders back, but the receptionist at the executive suite looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she said. "Hasper has requested no interruptions." "Since when do I count as an interruption?" No answer, just a glance towards the glass wall behind her where two men in dark suits were already seated in the boardroom. She didn't recognize either of them. Later that afternoon, she was in the kitchen when she heard it. A murmur of low voices in the hallway near her office. She moved closer, careful not to make a sound. "Are you sure it's him?" "That's what Hasper said. He was on the board during the hostile takeover days. He's got the connection to Rui and the ghost investor in the second round. Apparently. Why now? No idea. But if he's here, it's because someone wants something cleaned up." And then the last voice, sharp and quiet. "You know who he's married to, right?" Silence. Then a dry, disbelieving laugh. Incredible. And she thought no one would notice. She stood there, frozen. When she came home, I was in the garage, tuning the motorcycle I hadn't ridden in years. She watched me for a while before finally speaking. You knew this was going to happen. I didn't look up. You're going to have to be more specific. She took a step forward. The man in the lobby, the one you helped. Who is he really? I wiped my hands on a rag. Someone I knew a long time ago. He stays off social media. Prefers real relationships. She crossed her arms. He looked at you like he knew you. I met her eyes. Then he knows me. She blinked. So he's some consultant. I smiled faintly. Advises occasionally, steps in when leadership goes sideways. Quietly and effectively. She stepped back, her eyes narrowing. And you just know people like that. I went back to the bike. You never asked who I kept in touch with. She didn't speak after that. Just stood there, watching me, trying to do the math with variables she never bothered to collect because she never thought she'd need them. In her world, I was just the guy behind the scenes, the one who fixed cabinet hinges and paid off student loans without complaining. The guy who could iron a blouse better than she could. Not a threat, never a threat, until now. And the worst part was, she still didn't know how deep the network went. Not yet. But tomorrow the curtain would be pulled back a little further, and what she would see, well, it wouldn't be her reflection. Not anymore. By Wednesday morning, her voice had lost its sharp edge. It was still firm, practiced, but the conviction behind it had weakened, like someone trying to walk confidently on a floor they now suspected was made of glass. Her boss, Hasper, barely looked at her in their morning meeting. He was polite, even clipped, but he didn't ask for her opinion like he used to. He didn't hand her the new presentation, just said, "We're reviewing that in a different forum now. I appreciate your notes on the earlier draft." She blinked. "But I finalized the proposal." I know. It was the way he said it. Not angry, not even disappointed, just tired, the kind of tired people get after learning something they can't unlearn. Her inbox was a mess. By 10 a.m. documents she'd already approved came back flagged for review. HR requested clarification on an item she'd submitted 2 months ago. A junior analyst, someone who usually trembled when she walked into a room, suggested reformatting her forecast model for an external review. External. She texted Hasper, no reply. She called him at lunch. Straight to voicemail. At 4:17 p.m., she walked past the glass boardroom on the top floor. The door was almost closed, but not quite. She wasn't even going to listen until she heard her name. The kind of mention that makes your spine straighten instinctively. She's married to him. Pause. Are you kidding me? No, they confirmed this morning. He has legacy shares through the Riemann Trust. Never made a fuss. Never even used his vote. Someone else let out a low whistle. She thought no one would notice. Incredible. And then the punchline. Low. Almost amused. She played corporate poker with the man who owned the deed to the casino. She didn't hear the rest. She didn't need to. By the time she got home, she was carrying her shoes in her hand. No dramatic clicks of heels on the floor that night. I was in the kitchen, reading an old investment brief and drinking jasmine tea. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Did you tell anyone anything?" I looked up slowly. "About what?" "About me," she said. "To that man, to anyone. I'm not stupid. I know what's happening." I put down my mug. "No, you're not stupid." She took a step forward. "Then," I smiled slightly. "You said I wasn't ambitious." Her mouth opened, but I kept talking. "You never asked if I had connections." She looked at me like I'd just turned out the lights in her head. No rage, no insults, just a silent calculation trying to reboot a system that had short-circuited. "You're sabotaging me," she said, her voice thinner than usual. I tilted my head. "Am I? You're doing something behind the scenes. Something changed and it's you. I know it." I stood up and walked past her towards the hallway. "Maybe. Or maybe you finally hit the limit of how far performance can take someone." Her hand grabbed my arm. Not hard, just enough to stop me. "I built everything I have. Don't you dare try to tear it down over some stupid comment at a party." I met her eyes then. "A comment?" I asked. "No, this isn't about a comment. This is about a pattern, about the fact that I disappeared from your story a long time ago, and you didn't notice until the crowd started turning around." She let go of me. I left her in the hallway. She didn't follow. She just stood there watching me walk away again. Only this time she didn't know if I would stop, or that I might be gone by the time she finally decided to run after me. The mirror she used to check her makeup in every morning was starting to crack, not because someone had hit it, but because it had been reflecting a lie for too long. And now the truth was seeping through, piece by piece. Thursday morning, she came home late. That was unusual. Normally at 8 a.m. she was already halfway through a war room meeting, but today she called in, said she needed to catch up on files. The truth was, she barely slept. She kept replaying that voice in the boardroom. She thought no one would notice. The way they'd said it, like it was a joke, like she was the punchline. She wandered around the kitchen like a ghost in her own house. Robe half-tied, spoon in the cereal. She didn't eat. Her phone vibrated 3 times on the counter. She didn't check it, but then something else rang. The landline. No one used the landline. It was just there like a relic we never bothered to disconnect. She picked it up on instinct, more reflex than decision. A man's voice. Older, calm, too articulate to be casual, too cold to be friendly. Yes, that's the wife, he was saying. I didn't know she was married to the original founder's nephew. She kept it quiet all this time. A pause, the click of a lighter. Yes, that family name was scrubbed. Hostile takeover years ago. Ugly business, but the shares are still in play. Silent vote. He's the last blood link to the Riemann Paper Trust. Smart move. Staying off the radar this long. Her hand trembled. She leaned on the counter so she wouldn't fall. The name Riemann hadn't been spoken in the office in years. Not since the merger. Not since Hasper clawed his way to the CEO spot, burying the past and pandering to investors hungry for leaner leadership. The original founder, the man who built the company, was treated like a fossil, erased from every presentation. Even the internal wikis didn't mention him anymore. And yet, here was her husband, the founder's nephew. She didn't even know his mother's maiden name. She'd never asked. She assumed his family was middle class from the Midwest, maybe finance-related. She'd joked once that he probably came out of the womb holding a tax form. He'd laughed at the time. God, how he'd laughed. She put the phone down, not in the cradle, but slowly, as if it might explode. I was outside in the yard, trimming the overgrowth from the ivy we'd planted last spring. She came out barefoot, her face pale, her eyes wide. You lied to me, she said. No hello, no preamble. I looked up from the shears. About what? About who you are. I took off my gloves. I never lied. You never told me you were related to Riemann, that your name was on anything, that you had shares, silent or not. She broke off, her breath catching. I've worked at that company for 9 years. How did I not know? I tilted my head, studied her. You never asked. That's not an answer. I took the shears, set them on the ledge. You were busy, I said simply. She blinked. Busy. I met her eyes. Climbing. Silence. You let me make a fool of myself, she whispered. No, I said. You did that all on your own. You just never realized how many people were watching. She sank into one of the patio chairs as if her legs had given out. She stared at the ivy as if it could spell something out for her. You were there the whole time, she said softly. Right under their noses. Right under my nose. Watching. I sat across from her. I wasn't watching. I was waiting. Waiting for what? I smiled faintly. For the moment you would look at me and finally see what you'd had beside you. She opened her mouth, closed it, then stared at me. Really looked at me, as if she were seeing a stranger in her own backyard. But I wasn't a stranger. She was, because all this time she thought she'd married a man who carried her bags and paid the utility bill. She thought ambition wore a Rolex and barked orders through a Bluetooth headset. But the man who built the company's foundations taught me otherwise. Power isn't loud, it's quiet and permanent. She didn't cry. Not then. That would come later. For now she just sat there, shivering, unmoored, as if the ladder she'd been climbing for years had just vanished from under her feet, and she was realizing it was never hers to begin with. She spent almost an hour getting ready. Not because she was nervous, she didn't get nervous, but because the dinner that night was, as she put it, crucial. High-profile clients, old money, new alliances. She told herself tonight would be the pivot, that whatever tremors had shaken her position in the last few days could be fixed with the right dress, the right speech, and the right glass of wine held at the perfect 45-degree angle. I was reading in the living room when she passed. Her perfume followed her like it had a purpose. She didn't say goodbye, just checked her lipstick in the mirror one last time and left. She didn't know I had a dinner planned too. The place was discreet. High ceilings, soft lighting, the kind of place with no prices on the menu and only one seating a night in the private room. Booked months in advance, not by her team, not by the firm, but by someone else entirely. She walked in confidently, phone in hand, reviewing last-minute points. The hostess looked up, smiled politely, then frowned slightly as she checked the tablet. Excuse me, what was the name again? She said it clearly and slowly, as if the woman was clearly not processing correctly. Another pause, longer this time. I don't have you on the list, the hostess said, her voice firm but gentle. I don't see a reservation under your name or your company's. She tried again. I'm here for the Alvar and Juno dinner. It's a private event. The hostess nodded. Yes, of course. One moment. She turned to a colleague and whispered something. Pulled up another screen. And that's when she saw me walk past her without so much as a glance. I was flanked by two men in bespoke suits, laughing at a joke one of them had made behind us. Another advisor held a briefcase, clearly in the middle of a discussion. At the entrance to the private room, the maitre d' greeted me personally, hand outstretched. Welcome, Mr. Carter. Your table is ready. Her breath hitched. I glanced over my shoulder, just briefly, just enough to catch her expression, the confusion sliding into disbelief, and then into the beginning of panic. She didn't follow me. She couldn't. She pulled out her phone, stepped outside, and called me. I let it ring once, twice, then answered with my usual calm. You didn't tell me you were coming to this dinner, she said, her voice tight. You didn't ask, I replied. Don't be glib. This was my event, my night. You just walked in like you owned the place. I took a sip of champagne. Well, you introduced me as your +1 at the gala. I just corrected the record. Silence. You blindsided me. No, I said. I accepted an invitation. From who? From someone who remembered the founder's name and mine. I let that hang for a moment before adding. They said they wanted someone at the table with a longer memory and fewer filters. You're not in corporate leadership, she hissed. I'm not, I agreed. But I know who is. And then I hung up. Inside, the dinner began. The room was warm, buzzing with possibility. They poured wine from bottles older than her career. They asked me about legacy positions, about strategic guidance, about cultural shifts and future-proofing. No one asked about her. She didn't get a seat at the table, not because I took it, but because the table was never hers to begin with. She'd spent years climbing a scaffold, not knowing that the foundations were quietly held by the man she dismissed every morning with a distracted kiss and a fresh list of meetings. Now, standing on the sidewalk outside that restaurant in 4-inch heels and a designer dress that suddenly felt heavy, she watched the glass walls reflect a version of reality she'd never bothered to consider. And for the first time, she realized that the circles she thought she'd conquered weren't shrinking, they were closing without her. Friday morning came like a blade through silk, silent, clean, irreversible. She walked into the building with determination, her back straight, her lips tight, her makeup immaculate. A walking statement of the kind that said, I'm still here. Because that was the game, now wasn't it? Damage control, optics, stay visible, hold on to the narrative long enough to twist it back in her favor. But the first thing she noticed wasn't the rigid smile from the receptionist or the lack of greetings from passing assistants. It was the desk. Her desk wasn't there. In its place was a meaningless decorative plant, the kind of thing offices use to erase someone without having to say the words. She spun on her heel and headed for her boss's suite, but was intercepted by a woman from HR, one she barely recognized. Can we talk for a moment? The woman asked, her voice brittle. I don't have an HR meeting scheduled. The woman handed her a sealed envelope. You do now? Inside was a short memo, pending internal readjustment. Please report to the advisory office. Room 17B. Immediate. Advisory. That wasn't a department. It wasn't even on the org chart. It was the ghost wing, the floor with dark glass doors, recessed lighting, and names that didn't appear on email chains. She took the elevator alone. No one joined her. When the doors opened, she hesitated for the first time all week. Room 17B had no nameplate, just a small frosted glass panel next to the handle. She walked in. There were no desks, just a single long table. At its head sat the man from the rain, dressed in navy blue, neat, radiating the kind of stillness that makes people forget how to talk. And beside him, casually flipping through a folder, sat her husband. She opened her mouth. Neither of them looked up. Another man came in behind her and quietly closed the door. The man from the rain, Mason, she finally remembered, spoke first. Please, take a seat. She remained standing. What is this? Some kind of joke? Mason ignored the question. After reviewing the submitted materials and conducting interviews with various parties, we have identified multiple areas of concern. Her husband passed her a second folder. Breach of discretion regarding confidential materials. Mason continued. A pattern of inappropriate boundary violations with a superior, subsequently corroborated by internal correspondence and witness statements. Are you talking about Hasper? She interrupted. That was personal, not policy. Her husband finally looked at her. Everything's policy when you're being watched. She stared at him. You're behind this. He didn't flinch. I'm not. Then why are you here? Her voice broke on the last word. He leaned back in his chair, calm, detached. You're asking the wrong question. The right one is, why are you here? She fell silent. Mason closed the folder. This is not a formal termination. Yet, you will be placed on conduct review pending findings. Effective immediately, your access to executive documents, company communications, and public-facing platforms is suspended. Her breathing grew shallow. You can't just. Her husband held up a hand slightly, not to stop her, just to acknowledge her presence the way you would a loud car driving past. I didn't do this to you, he said quietly. You did it to yourself. I just held up a mirror with a little more light. She felt the walls closing in. Not all at once. Slowly, silently, like a room losing air. You want revenge, she hissed. He shook his head. I want accountability. And for once, you're not the one holding the clipboard. Mason stood. That will be all for now. The door opened again. A different HR rep this time, silent, waiting. She walked out slowly, each step heavier than the last. She didn't cry in the elevator. Not yet. She was still wearing her heels, after all. But somewhere between the 17th floor and the first, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to believe until now. He never raised his voice. He never made a scene. He never demanded anything. And yet here she was, being written out of her own story, page by page, erased by the man she once described as unambitious. He didn't want her seat at the table. He just wanted the table reset. She hesitated to go. Her mother's text had arrived on Friday night, formal and unsettling. We'd like you and David to come for dinner on Sunday. Your father has questions. No emojis, no softening phrases, just that cold, perfect punctuation. She showed up alone. Of course she did. He didn't say a word when she told him, just looked at her over his reading glasses and said, Your family has always preferred a curated version of the truth. Don't let me disrupt that. So now she was on the porch of her childhood home, dressed in neutral tones and a strange smile. The house smelled the same, of lemon furniture polish and rigid expectations. Her father was at the head of the table, arms crossed. He didn't stand when she entered. Her mother was already seated. The plates were set, the silverware in perfect alignment. No food, just silence. She sat, smoothed the napkin in her lap. Mom, Dad, I know things have. Her father didn't wait. Why didn't you tell us? The question hung in the air like a verdict. She blinked. Tell you what. Her mother's lips tightened. He leaned forward. That you married into the Riemann Trust. That David, your husband, is not just some accountant. That he's the founder's nephew, and you've spent the last few years pretending he was background noise while trying to outclimb him in his own shadow. She swallowed. It wasn't like that. He gave us the reports, her father said. Dates, documents, images from that gala. He picked up a manila folder from beside his plate. The findings from the advisory. She looked at the folder as if it had a pulse. Her voice broke. Why would he give you that? Her mother spoke now, her tone sharp. Because he correctly assumed we would care. He ambushed me, she said. He set this up to humiliate me. No, her father said flatly. You did that yourself. You flaunted your ambition. You belittled your own husband at a public event, and you aligned yourself with a superior while ignoring the real legacy you married into. She turned to her mother, desperation tinging her voice. Are you on his side? Her mother didn't hesitate. We are on the side of the man who never embarrassed this family, who paid for your niece's rehab without telling anyone, who covered the difference when your father's business loan was denied, who fixed the estate tax filing your sister botched. Her breath caught. He never told me any of that. No, her mother said. He didn't, because he's not you. The silence that followed was unbearable. Her father stood. You're welcome to stay for dinner, but we will not be discussing this again. We will not continue to pretend. Her hands were trembling in her lap. What is that supposed to mean? It means, her mother said, rising as well, that we see you now, and we see him. They left her at the table. No food was served, no wine was poured. She sat in silence, surrounded by plates that would never be filled at a table that no longer had room for denial. She didn't cry on the drive home, didn't scream. She just stared out the window, realizing that the insulation she'd always believed protected her, her name, her charm, her curated image, had finally worn away, and the cold was getting in. She wasn't losing control, she'd already lost it. She just hadn't realized how far she'd fallen. The summons arrived like a sterile calendar invite. Contract review. Legal compliance. 9:30 a.m. room 4C. No explanation, no subject line, no tone, just black text on white, like it had been spit out by a machine that didn't care how deep it cut. She arrived early, hoping to compose herself before the sharks circled, but the room was already occupied. 2 lawyers she recognized, and 1 she didn't. A compliance officer typing something on a laptop without looking up, and a chair at the head of the table, conspicuously empty, as if reserved for a ghost. She took a seat, clutching the leather folder she brought as if it could shield her. No one offered small talk. No one smiled. "Thank you for coming," the senior lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. "This won't take long." The tone chilled her more than the words. "We're conducting a routine audit of executive contracts following the recent advisory board activity," he continued. "Your case has come up due to several concerning discrepancies." "I haven't breached my contract," she said quickly. "I've done everything within the scope." He raised an eyebrow, opened a thin folder, and turned it towards her. Clause 14.3. Misuse of public platform or reputationally damaging conduct tied to internal executive relationships. In the event such actions occur, executive protections, including severance, stock rights, and deferred compensation, are subject to immediate forfeiture. She looked at the page. The words were familiar, but the clause was not. Not in her memory. "This wasn't part of my original agreement." "Yes, it was," the younger lawyer said. "It was linked in the supplementary compliance addendum. You initialed it electronically." Her mouth went dry. She flipped to the signature page, and there it was. Not just her initials. Another name right above the sourcing line for the clauses. Drafted by D. Carter. Compliance Review 2B. Board approved November 6, 2014. Her throat closed. 2014. A full year before they'd even started dating. "Wait," she whispered, "he wrote this." The senior lawyer nodded. "Yes. Mr. Carter worked in compliance consulting during the Rymont transition. He authored several behavioral clauses, including this one." She tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. "That was a decade ago. He didn't even know me then." "No," the compliance woman said, finally looking up. But he knew the pattern. The folder opened again. Inside, a timeline. Not just her emails, not just photos from the gala, but cross-referenced entries, her name appearing alongside certain investor dips, casual comments caught on internal Zoom calls, leaked internal figures, and a video. Her laughing with Hasper, her hand still on his shoulder. "Taken by a junior associate," the man said. "They submitted it with a formal ethics complaint." "I didn't know." "Of course not. Why would you?" She was the chain of command. "Why now?" she asked. "Why bring this up now?" He tapped the clause again. "Because it was never about now. It was about when." She leaned back, her heart pounding in her ears. The blood rushed so fast she thought she might faint. She had climbed so carefully, so deliberately, always watching her step, but it never occurred to her to look at the ground itself. And now there it was, a trapdoor, one her husband had built with her signature stamped on top of it. The senior lawyer closed the folder. "This is not a termination meeting. Not yet, but your contract no longer protects you under executive status. Any changes to your role, access, or compensation are now subject to review without obligation." "Are you saying they could fire me without a cent?" He didn't flinch. "I'm saying your reputation was your currency, and you spent it." She stood up abruptly. "I want a copy of everything." "You will receive one. And legal counsel is your right," he cut her off. "Though I suggest you act fast. Time is a factor." She turned to the door, her hands shaking on the knob. "Ms. Carter," the compliance officer added from behind her. "One more thing." She turned back. "We reviewed the original author names on the clause before you came on board. You never questioned his." "What?" She tried to answer, tried to summon something. Anything that wouldn't make her sound like the blind, arrogant climber she now knew she was. I didn't recognize it, she said softly. The woman nodded once. That was the point. She walked out into the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a judgment. Every inch of protection she thought she had, every clause, every benefit, every legal parachute, had been shredded by the man she thought was beneath her. And he hadn't needed to shout. He hadn't needed to leak anything. He'd simply let the systems she climbed finally recognize the architect she ignored. Did it rain again that morning? Of course it did. It always rains at the endings. But this time she didn't have a car service waiting, or a presentation to give, or 3 assistants scrambling for her attention. She had a cardboard box, just one. Her nameplate didn't fit, so she left it. Let someone else peel it off the glass. She knew they would have already reassigned her office anyway. No press release, no farewell lunch, no exit interview, just a stiff envelope, a revoked ID badge, and an escorted walk out the side door. HR's polite way of saying, "You're no longer allowed near the lobby." Funny, she used to own that lobby. Her heels echoed in that place like a soundtrack. Interns flinched when she walked past. Executives paused their calls to offer fake greetings. She controlled perception with the precision of a puppeteer. But today, no one looked up, no one looked at all. She reached the sidewalk and stood under the building's small awning. The rain fell in sharp, unforgiving vertical lines. The cardboard box sagged in one corner, the ink from an old memo bleeding at the edges. She didn't see him at first. Her eyes were on the pavement, too tired to look for threats. But then, a movement, a soft, familiar voice. She turned. There they were, across the street. Her husband, standing under a wide black umbrella, talking to the old man from the Gala, the Rain Man. Only this time there was no shivering, no hesitation. He was steady. The umbrella tilted slightly to cover David more than himself. They were talking, not smiling, but comfortable, like 2 men who'd known each other long before that fateful night outside the Gala. Like 2 men who'd seen something ugly in this world and decided to play the long game. She froze. The old man looked up, saw her, held her gaze. There was no hatred, no smugness, just recognition. The kind offered to someone who finally understands what they lost too late to fix it. He turned to David and nodded. Her husband nodded back. Nothing more. No farewell, no cruel barb. Not even a glance in her direction after that. Just 2 men under an umbrella saying everything without a word. She stood there, soaked now, the rain seeping down her collar. No one offered to share their cover. No one asked if she was okay, and in that moment, she understood. It was never about ambition. It was never about climbing higher or speaking louder or dressing sharper or knowing the right people at the right time. It was about respect, the kind you don't demand, the kind you earn. Slowly, silently, in the spaces between the noise. She thought she'd married a quiet man. What she didn't realize is that he was the architect of the very world she tried to conquer. And when the lights dimmed, the names disappeared, and the applause faded. Only one of them was still standing, dry, serene, and seen. The other was just forgotten, dripping in the rain, with a cardboard box in her hand, staring at the echo of what could have been.